Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped into the living room. It was too quiet. Not peaceful, hollow. My mother sat at the kitchen counter sipping her usual tea, but her shoulders were stiff, her eyes refusing to meet mine. My father was standing by the fireplace, staring at the mantel like it held a secret he couldn't speak out loud. I asked once gently, "Did someone break in?" No answer. I asked again, firmer, "Where is the safe?" Still nothing. That's when I felt it. That sharp, sinking feeling deep in my gut. The one you get just before the floor drops out from under you. I walked to the study myself, pulled back the rug, lifted the panel. The safe was still there, but it was empty. The box that held my engagement ring gone. The velvet case, the insurance certificate, the handwritten letter he left with it, all gone. I turned slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Where is it?" My mother sighed, like she was the one hurting. "It's just a ring, sweetheart," she said. But it wasn't. It was the last part of him I had. My fiancé James, gone 2 years now. A car accident. No warning. No goodbye. Just a siren call in the middle of the night, and the blur of funeral flowers and shock. He left me that ring. Not just as a memory, as a promise. He used to joke that if something ever happened to him, he wanted me to have at least one rock that couldn't roll away. I wore it for months after he passed. Slept with it beside me. Then one day, I put it away in the safe. Not because I was over it, but because I wasn't. And I needed space to breathe. But I never said it didn't matter. I never said they could touch it. My father finally spoke. "We sold it." 3 words. Sharp enough to draw blood. I didn't move. "Why?" My voice cracked on the question. My mother looked guilty, then quickly turned cold. "Your sister needed help," she said, like that explained anything. "Help. She's been struggling. You know that. The breakup. The panic attacks. She needed to get away. Something immersive. Transformative." I blinked. "You sold my dead fiancé's ring to send her on a vacation?" "It's not a vacation," my father said quickly. "It's healing. A retreat. Bali." That word hit me like an insult. Bali. She's been through so much. I laughed. I don't know why. Maybe because the alternative was screaming. Or sobbing. Or both. "We've all been through so much," I said. "But you didn't sell her things. You sold mine." "She's fragile," my mother whispered. "She needs it more than you need that ring." I took a step back. That's when I saw the suitcase. By the door. Her suitcase. And then her. My sister came down the stairs barefoot and glowing. White linen pants. A gold necklace. She looked like peace had already been gifted to her in advance. "Hey," she said, not even sheepish. "I didn't know you were coming by." I stared at her. She smiled, wide open like she hadn't stolen a single thing. "I'm leaving for Bali tonight." No apology. Not even a flicker of guilt. My mouth was dry. "You knew that ring wasn't yours," I said, barely able to form the sentence. She shrugged. "You weren't wearing it anymore. Mom said you said it hurt too much. That doesn't make it yours. It's not like you were using it." And that's when I realized. They didn't see it as his. They didn't even see it as mine. To them, it was just a valuable object collecting dust in a vault. And their golden child needed saving. So they sold me. Quietly. Casually. Without even telling me. I turned toward the door. My mother called out, "Don't be dramatic." I didn't answer. Because in that moment I felt something deeper than rage. I felt erased. The ring wasn't just expensive. It was James. Everything about it had a story. He designed it himself, went to 3 jewelers, studied settings, asked questions I didn't even know he knew how to ask. He had no background in diamonds, no family heirlooms to repurpose. He just wanted to get it right. Something timeless but personal. Something that, in his words, would still feel like me even when I'm not around. When he proposed, it wasn't flashy. It was a picnic. Just us. On a Tuesday afternoon. Sandwiches, music playing from a tinny speaker. The kind of sky that makes you want to stay still for hours. He didn't kneel. He just pulled out the box, handed it to me, and said, "This is yours if you'll have all the other parts of me too. Even the messy ones." I laughed so hard I cried. Then I said yes. And he looked so relieved I thought he might cry too. He wore that same nervous smile every time I caught him watching me admire the ring afterward. Do you like it? He'd ask even a month in. Like he still couldn't believe I said yes. After he died, I wore it every single day. It didn't matter if I was grocery shopping or sitting in traffic or sobbing on the kitchen floor. The ring stayed on. It was my anchor, my proof. When people looked at me like I was too young to be a widow, I would let that diamond catch the light and remind myself, no, it was real. He was real. He loved me. But grief is strange. Some days it sits quietly in your chest like a stone. Other days it swells so fast it makes your throat close. The first time I took the ring off was 7 months after the funeral. My fingers had swollen. I'd gained weight from stress. The band pinched. And it hurt to look at something that beautiful when I felt so hollow. So I wrapped it in velvet, placed it in its original box, and locked it in the family safe. Not to forget him. To protect him. From the world. From myself. From time. I never told my parents they could touch it. I never said it didn't matter anymore. I still visited it. Sometimes I'd open the safe and just hold the box. Sit on the floor and cry. Sometimes I'd talk to him out loud. It sounds crazy, I know. But when someone's love becomes memory, you take what you can get. Words. Smells. Old voice notes. And objects that remind you they were here. Not just once, but fully, deeply, unapologetically here. That ring was the last thing he gave me. Not in a rush. Not out of guilt. Not as a hand-me-down. He chose it for me. And when they sold it, when my parents decided that healing my sister's latest crisis was more urgent than preserving what I had left, it felt like they had dug him up and tossed him aside. They said I was stuck in the past. But it wasn't the past I was clinging to. It was the only part of my future I still had. And they sold it. To pay for yoga classes in a jungle. To fund a luxury healing experience for someone who never had to earn anyone's sacrifice. My sister would sip cocktails under palm trees, while I mourned a man who would never know what they'd done to his last gift. And the worst part? She'd come back renewed. While I had to rebuild from ash. My sister's name is Ava. And from the moment she was born, the world bent itself around her. She was loud and bright and messy in ways that people found charming. If I forgot my homework, I was lazy. If Ava forgot hers, the teacher gave her an extension. If I came home late, I was irresponsible. If she came home late, she just lost track of time. By the time we were in high school, it was already clear. I was the reliable one. And she was the one who needed to be rescued. Always. When she crashed my mom's car, they blamed the rain. When she failed 2 college classes, they blamed the professors. When she cheated on her boyfriend, they said she was confused and working through some inner things. And when James died, they expected me to be the strong one. Not because I was strong, but because they didn't want to have to worry about me. So I grieved quietly. I didn't scream or collapse. I held myself together with trembling hands. Smiled when people offered condolences. Wrote thank you notes for flower arrangements I couldn't look at without crying. I buried James with grace, so Ava didn't have to be uncomfortable. She cried at the funeral loudly, in the front row, sobbing into a tissue like she was the one who lost the love of her life. She hugged me after and whispered, "I don't know how you're standing right now." Neither did I. And for a while she was kind. She called. Brought over takeout. Slept in the guest room the first few nights. I couldn't sleep alone. But it didn't last. Within a month, she was talking about her breakup again. About how she couldn't get over Matt, the guy who dumped her because she cheated. How she felt emotionally gutted and disconnected from her inner compass. I listened. Nodded. Tried to empathize. I shouldn't have. Because every time she spiraled, it became the family's emergency. She started therapy. Quit it after 2 sessions. Got into crystal healing. Lost interest. Started journaling. Burned the journal. Then decided Western medicine was too sterile. And she needed something holistic. One night over dinner she dropped the line, "I've been looking into healing retreats." My mother looked up from her wineglass. My father set down his fork. "Where?" they asked in unison. "Bali," she said like it was obvious. She had photos saved. Videos bookmarked. Places with infinity pools and herbal saunas and guided meditations with titles like Release Your Root Trauma and Awaken the Divine Feminine. She was glowing just talking about it. I asked, "How much does this cost?" She shrugged. "Depends. 10 to 15 grand maybe? More with flights. But it's worth it. I need to reset. I've been through so much." I wanted to scream. She hadn't even said James's name in 6 months. My mother leaned in. "Let's talk about how we can help you get there." And that's when I knew. They were already calculating it. They weren't going to say no. Because Ava had feelings. Ava had wounds. Ava's discomfort needed soothing, no matter the price. They didn't think I'd notice. That they had already decided the cost of her healing would be something I couldn't afford to lose. The safe was never supposed to be touched. It was installed the same week James proposed. My father insisted. Said with a ring that valuable. We needed somewhere secure, somewhere family only. He even joked, "This safe will outlive us all." It was supposed to be just for me. They promised. I remember standing there while the locksmith explained the passcode setup. My fingers trembling with excitement. My father smiled proudly. My mother hugged me and said, "Now it's protected no matter what." What a lie that turned out to be. Because when I found it empty, that same father wouldn't even look at me. He just stood there, still and silent, like if he avoided eye contact long enough, the betrayal might dissolve. My voice was sharp. "When?" He cleared his throat. "A few days ago. You didn't ask. You didn't call. You didn't even tell me." He opened his mouth, but my mother cut in, tone flat and defensive. "It's not like it was being used." Used? That word hit me like a slap. "It's not furniture, Mom. It was a part of him. You're being dramatic." That again. Always that. Every time I stood up for myself, it was dramatics. When Ava cried over a late period, it was an emotional emergency. But when I asked why they pawned the last gift from the man I was going to marry, that was overreacting. I walked to the study, yanked open the panel under the rug, and stared at the black void where my ring should have been. The air inside was colder than I expected. I reached in hoping stupidly that maybe they'd lied, that maybe it was still there. It wasn't. The box. The velvet. The ring. Gone. And in its place, a folded piece of paper. A printout. I opened it. A transaction slip. Appraisal estimate. $590,000. Final sale value. $417,000. Transfer confirmation. Ava's name. Bali Wellness Retreat. Paid in full. I froze. They didn't just sell the ring. They gave her the proceeds. No shared discussion. No mention of holding some for me. Not even a symbolic apology. Every dollar poured into her healing. I turned to my parents. "You used my pain to fix hers." My father tried. He really did. He stepped forward with a hand raised, voice low, almost pleading. "We thought maybe you'd moved on. You haven't worn the ring in so long. We thought it would be better used." Used. That word again. I stepped back. I kept it in the safe to protect it. Because I wasn't ready. Because I still needed him. "We didn't mean to hurt you," my mother added, her voice suddenly small. "You don't understand what Ava's been through." "No," I cut in. "You don't understand what I've been through." Because I didn't scream for help every 5 minutes. Because I didn't make my grief convenient or Instagrammable. No one spoke. My mother turned away. My father looked tired. And I looked at the space where love used to be. Because that's what the ring was. Not a jewel. Not a status symbol. Not a luxury. It was love. Solid. Tangible. Real. And now it was currency. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't scream. Didn't throw anything. Didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me crack open like I always feared I would. I just walked out. One step at a time. Down the hallway where family photos lined the walls. Graduation. Birthdays. Vacations. All the curated proof that we were once a happy, supportive household. That we loved each other. But those photos didn't show the hierarchy. They didn't show how every crisis of mine was handled with distance, while every tear Ava shed was treated like an earthquake. The sky was turning orange outside, sunset bleeding through the bare trees. I drove without a plan, hands trembling on the steering wheel. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away before I said something that would turn me into the villain in their version of events. I ended up at James's grave. I hadn't been in weeks. I parked without looking at the time, walked across the grass in heels I didn't remember putting on, and there it was. The simple gray stone. His name. The dash between the dates. Everything we were compressed into a line barely 2 inches long. I knelt. And I broke. No sobs. Just a leak. The kind of crying that sneaks up on you in silence. I whispered everything, how they sold the ring, how they didn't even ask, how they acted like what we had didn't matter because it didn't serve Ava's emotional arc. I laughed once, bitterly. You told me the ring would outlive everything, I said. Turns out my parents had a price tag for love. The wind picked up. Cold. Sharp. Stung against my cheeks. I stared at the name etched in stone and finally said the words I didn't know I'd been holding. They lost me today. Because that was the truth. Not in rage. Not in reaction. In certainty. Something snapped quietly inside me. Not like a tree cracking, but like a root pulling free from soil it no longer trusted. And I realized I didn't want to fight them anymore. I didn't want to demand they see my pain. Or beg for what was already gone. I wanted distance. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. When I got back home, I didn't even take off my coat. I opened my closet, pulled out a suitcase and started packing. No one called. No one noticed. Or maybe they thought I'd come back the way I always did. But this time I left the key on the counter. And I left a note. Not long. Not dramatic. Just folded, center of the kitchen table. You sold your daughter for a ticket to paradise. And I walked out the front door, closed it behind me, and kept walking. I didn't tell anyone where I went. Not my coworkers. Not old friends. Not extended family. I left my phone on airplane mode for days. Changed the wallpaper. Turned off the notifications. Blocked their numbers one by one. Not out of revenge but preservation. When you spend enough time being unheard, you eventually learn how to protect your silence. I crashed at a friend's place. A college roommate I hadn't spoken to in over a year. When she opened the door, she didn't ask questions. Just hugged me and said, "You can stay as long as you need." That kind of kindness is louder than apologies. The first few mornings I woke up disoriented. My body braced for guilt. For a confrontation. For someone to tell me I was being dramatic. But no one did. I made coffee slowly. Walked outside barefoot. Let the sunlight land on my face without earning it. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying someone else's crisis on my shoulders. I started looking for work. Something simple. Something quiet. Landed a job at a bookstore downtown. Small hours, gentle customers, the kind of place where people still whispered instead of scrolling. I liked the silence. The shelves. The routine. I took the late shifts. Closed up alone. Learned the rhythm of locking each door. Turning off each light. Breathing in the soft smell of pages and old wood. In the evenings I wrote. Not essays. Not explanations. Just thoughts. What I wanted. What I deserved. What I was no longer willing to apologize for. I made a list of things they never let me need. Rest. Grace. Space to break without proving I was still useful afterward. I started going to therapy. Quietly. No Instagram posts. No family updates. Just me in a small room, finally saying things out loud that I had swallowed for years. I told my therapist about James. How it wasn't just that he died. It was how quickly the world expected me to recover. To smile again. To celebrate Ava's milestones. To pretend like grief was a phase instead of a fracture. I told her about the ring. About the safe. About the sound my mother made when I confronted her. Like I had ruined something she loved. She said something I wrote down in my journal that night. Grief isn't loud, but it remembers everything. I stopped wearing makeup for a while. I stopped returning small talk with people who didn't know how to sit in silence. I stopped giving away explanations like free samples. And slowly, with no fireworks, no dramatic shifts, no applause, I began to feel like someone new. Not healed, but growing. Not angry, but aware. Not a victim. But finally my own. The letter came on a Thursday. I almost threw it out. It arrived at the bookstore. Forwarded mail from my old address. Cream-colored envelope. Heavy paper. No return name, just a firm in the corner I didn't recognize at first. I slid my finger beneath the seal without thinking, half expecting it to be another reminder of something lost. Inside was a typed note, signed by a lawyer I'd only met once, James's family attorney. There had been a revision to his estate. Apparently, something James had tucked away. Not money, not immediately, but an investment account built quietly over the last few years of his life. Something he started before we were even engaged. He had called it the safety net. His lawyer's letter said James updated it shortly after he proposed. In the event of my death, it read, this trust is to be delivered solely to my fiancée. No questions asked, no interference, no division. For her future. Because she made mine. I sat there at the break room table, reading those lines over and over until the edges of the page blurred from my tears. He never told me. He must have wanted it to be a surprise. Maybe for our wedding day. Maybe for a first home. Maybe just something private. Something unshared, because that's how he was with money, generous but quiet. There were assets listed. Bonds. A retirement rollover. A small property outside the city. It added up to a number that made my breath catch. Nothing flashy, but enough to matter. Enough to build a new life on. Enough to never need my parents again. The next day the calls started. My number had changed, but they still had my email. Started with my father. A long guilt-laced message. Your mother and I have made mistakes. We know we've hurt you. We miss you terribly. Please come home. We're struggling, honey. Struggling. I read that word and felt nothing. My mother followed up with one of her famous guilt grenades. You've always been the responsible one. The strong one. We need you now.
No επάλεγη.
No mention of the ring. Just need. Then Ava's email came. Colorful font. Breezy tone. Probably typed in Bali with a smoothie in her hand. Hey, I heard about the estate. Good for you. Seriously. Maybe this can be a fresh start for all of us. You don't have to be so distant. I'm actually doing a chakra cleanse right now, and would love to include you in the healing energy. Healing energy. That nearly made me laugh. I didn't reply. I didn't rage. I didn't send photos of the letter or scans of the property deed or anything else. I just sat with it. Sat with the realization that James had seen this coming in some way. That he had loved me enough to prepare for a future I would have to walk alone, but not empty-handed. That while my own family had sold what was left of his love, he had still managed to leave me more. Not for revenge, not as a comeback, but as a final act of devotion. And in that moment I knew, they hadn't just lost my ring, they'd lost the chance to ever hold me again. They showed up at my door 2 weeks later. I knew they might. The emails had become more frequent. My father sent one that said he'd be in town on business, which was strange since he hadn't worked in over a year. I didn't respond. I didn't think I needed to. But then came the knock. 3 slow taps. I didn't even have to look through the peephole. I opened the door anyway. There they stood. My mother in her best guilt sweater, hands clasped tight. My father behind her, already rehearsing whatever speech he thought might win me over. Both of them looking smaller somehow, like people who had finally realized their control didn't reach as far as they thought. My mother smiled first. That soft, quivering smile she used whenever she needed something and didn't want to say it out loud. Sweetheart, she said like we hadn't spoken in months. I waited. She stepped forward as if to hug me. I didn't move. My father cleared his throat. We just wanted to talk. They asked if they could come in. I let them. Not out of kindness. Out of curiosity. I wanted to see what the performance would be this time. We sat at the small kitchen table I'd bought secondhand from a thrift store when I moved into this apartment. No more family heirloom furniture. No more chairs I was afraid to scratch. Just space I built on my own. They looked uncomfortable. Good. My mother was the first to speak. She started slow, talking about Ava. How things hadn't been easy lately, how she'd extended her trip, how she'd maxed out the card they gave her, just for emergencies. She said the word emergencies like a question, hoping I'd agree. I didn't. Then she pivoted to me. How they were proud of what I'd done. How resilient I was. How strong. How smart. She said she always knew I'd figure things out. It sounded like a compliment, but I knew what it was. Positioning. Because if I was strong, then I could carry everyone again. If I was smart, then I could help with the new financial stress they were under. If I was successful, then surely I wouldn't mind. My father added his piece. Look, we know we messed up. We didn't think. You did, I interrupted. Calm. Steady. They both looked at me. You thought exactly what you always think, that I'd be fine. That no matter what you took from me, I'd still show up. Still answer. Still come home when it mattered. My voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. You think because I don't fall apart in front of you that I'm made of steel, that I'm built to hold whatever mess you create. But I'm not. My mother opened her mouth. I held up my hand. You sold my ring, the last piece of the man I loved, without asking. You used it to send Ava on a luxury healing trip while telling me my grief was old. You erased him. You erased me. No one spoke. I stood up. Not to intimidate, just to end it. You don't get to crawl back now that the daughter you ignored turned out okay. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your emotional insurance policy. And I'm not here to fix what you broke. I walked to the door, held it open. My mother's eyes were wet. My father looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. They walked out without another word. And this time I was the one who closed the door behind them. I didn't rush. Weeks passed after I closed that door. I didn't mark the day in a calendar. I didn't post about it. I didn't even cry when they left. I just moved. One morning I found myself walking into a small custom jeweler downtown. The kind of place that didn't advertise on billboards. Quiet, careful hands behind the glass. The bell over the door rang soft and low when I stepped in. The woman behind the counter looked up. She greeted me like someone who understood loss. I didn't bring a photo. Didn't say James's name. I just said, I want to design something that honors a man who never stopped protecting me. She nodded and pulled out her sketchpad. We worked in silence at first. Then slowly the ring started to take shape. Not a replica. I didn't want a ghost of what was lost. I wanted a resurrection. We chose a stone with the same shape as the original, but cut deeper, sharper edges, more light trapped inside. A white gold band, but this time with tiny stars etched along the inside. Private. Hidden. Just for me. It wasn't about replacing James. It was about reclaiming what they took. Every detail meant something. The stone, clarity, because I saw everything clearly now. The etching. My reminder that grief is a constellation, not a shadow. The weight, solid but not overwhelming, just like me. When it was finished, the jeweler slid it across the counter. No box. No speech. Just a ring resting on velvet. Picked it up. Slipped it onto my right hand. Fit perfectly. And for the first time in over 2 years, I didn't feel like I was grasping at a memory. I felt like I was honoring a promise. The one he made when he told me I'd still have a piece of him even when he was gone. I walked out of that shop into cold winter air. Hand in pocket, heart still, breath steady. That night, I lit a candle and sat by the window. No music. No noise. Just me. And the quiet, undeniable sense that I had finally taken something back. Not from my parents, not from Ava, but from the version of myself who once believed silence was strength. They don't say it to my face, but I hear it. In the pauses when I enter a room. In the way old friends hesitate before asking about my family. In the messages that start with, I probably shouldn't say this, but, and end with, they're worried about you. Worried. As if choosing peace over permission is a red flag. As if distance must always mean something's wrong. A mutual friend told me my mother cried at book club. Said she doesn't understand why I cut her off. That I've become cold. Hardened. That I let the ring change me. They're right. I did let it change me. But not in the way they think. I became someone who no longer asks to be chosen. Someone who doesn't wait to be invited into rooms she built with her own hands. I became someone who doesn't take on other people's chaos just to prove I'm strong enough. It's not cold. It's calm. And I earned it. Now, when people ask about my parents, I say we're distant. When they ask about my sister, I say she's healing, I guess, in whatever zip code she last posted from. I don't add commentary. I don't explain. I let them fill the silence with their own discomfort. Because I don't owe them the version of me that kept bleeding for applause. One night I was invited to a charity gala. Something James would have loved. He always liked dressing up for a cause, pretending we were fancier than we were. I wore a black gown, simple, elegant. Hair up. No necklace. But I wore the ring. Not as a statement. Not to provoke. Just because it felt like mine again. People stared at it. One woman leaned in and said, "Is that?" I smiled. Yes. She smiled back. Didn't ask for the story. Just nodded. And I liked that. Later that night, someone from the past approached me. A neighbor. A woman who used to host our family for dinner once a month. She looked surprised to see me. Then she asked with soft curiosity, "Will your parents be joining you tonight?" I took a sip of my drink. Then I said it. Calm. Clear. Final. They're not on the guest list anymore. She blinked. Didn't ask again. Because some answers don't need explanation. Some choices don't need permission. And some daughters? They grow up. They leave.